In his book, Getting Things Done, David Allen provides some excellent practical wisdom for productivity. But there is something that I overlooked in applying GTD that eventually made my life feel more like mind like tsunami rather than the mind like water that the book talks about. I think other people have experienced this as well. While this problem was mostly a mistake in my own application, I think it's also due to something that is underemphasized in GTD itself. A just about missing component of GTD, if you will. The issue is not that GTD gives no place to a schedule. The problem is that it doesn't show you how lists and your schedule relate specifically. Without clarity on this, I found that my lists were always fighting against my schedule. The key insight for me was when I realized that my actual next action lists had to be connected to my schedule in some way. Here's what I discovered. People work best from routines, not lists. This stood out to me so much as I was listening to the George Washington biography. The author was describing Washington's routine, and what stood out to me was that he didn't even have any lists. George Washington had no project lists or next action lists. So how did he get things done? Through a basic schedule. He would get up at 5 a.m. and give assignments to his workers. There's the principle of delegation we'll talk about. At 7 o'clock, he would have breakfast, and then he would ride around his farms on horseback for about 6 hours, assigning tasks, inspecting things, visiting people, and doing other things to keep things running smoothly. He would then have dinner with guests at 3 p.m. I don't know why so early. Then head into his office for about 2 hours at 5 p.m., writing letters and reading one or more of the 10 newspapers to which he subscribed, his biographer notes. Then he would come back out of his office at about 7 p.m. for tea with his guests. He and Martha would then retire at 9 o'clock. That was Washington's basic schedule. He got an amazing amount of work done, obviously, but he didn't operate from a bunch of lists, just a simple routine. If you have all of those lists or hear that you should have them, it's easy to end up thinking that it's the lists that should primarily govern your actions and day. But there's actually a better way. A basic routine governed by your mission and roles is the framework within which you should operate. This is not to say that there is no place for creating lists, for sure. But the lists we make shouldn't operate on their own. They should support our routines, and the routines in turn can create the time we need to do the things that are on our lists. So, how do you set up your week? You create a prototype week, or what we can call a time map. A time map is another name for your weekly schedule. Instead of starting from scratch each week, you divide your week into time zones, each representing the main roles and responsibilities of your life. You don't need to be too detailed here. In fact, getting too detailed might backfire. It's just too complicated. And you don't need to make every day the same either. You just need a basic template that represents your main roles at a high level and provides zones for a few specific recurring routines. On the screen right now is one example of a time map. Notice that the zones are based on the roles, but also at the same time, notice you don't have to specify the exact role that's behind each zone. All of your roles should be represented in your typical week, but above all, do keep it simple. For example, you might have a routine to check your email at noon and 3 p.m. Don't add these slots on your time map unless you feel like you need to. Those routines should just be on autopilot, or the time map will just get way too cumbersome. You can specify a theme for each day, which can be helpful. Such as category of work, or this is meeting day, this is project day. Now, you won't follow your time map exactly each week, when planning the upcoming week, for example, you might decide that it will work best to take Wednesday afternoon, which you ordinarily leave open to respond to emails, for project time. That's fine. Again, the point is that you have a basic framework which you can adapt as you need. One especially helpful benefit of a time map is that creating these activity zones will enable you to keep your related tasks together. That creates efficiency. When I put a basic schedule in place, it kept me from feeling like I had to always be doing something on my next action lists. I was able to keep the tasks on my list off my mind because I now had scheduled times when I would actually do them. It wouldn't be I create these lists and forget about them. Julie Morgenstern, a great time management expert, captures this dynamic very well. She says, instead of feeling that you have to act on every request the minute it crosses your path, you can glance at your time map, determine when you have time for this unexpected task, and either schedule it or skip it. When many tasks come up all at once, you don't have to jam them into your week or add all of them to your next action list. Instead, you can assign them to your various activity zones. Ideally, every task will have a general slot on your time map underneath which it fits. As we will see in the next session, the next step is to develop workflow routines for different time zones. Some of the more major routines will even have a time zone all to themselves, such as daily workflow and weekly workflow. And of course, there will be a lot of routines which are just an autopilot part of specific zones. So now we're on to the next session to find out exactly what these core routines are that we need to have in our week.